Welcome to Licking Non-Vanilla, a sex-positive hour of talk about kink, sexual mores, and writing dirty words. So grab a cup of cocoa, your favorite easy chair, and the lube as we go sailing into the dark, sweet waters of all things naughty. On Licking Non-Vanilla with your hosts Ralph Greco Jr. and M. Christian.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Licking Non-Vanilla. With me, one of your hosts, Ralph Greco Jr., and across the aisle from me, across the well, not the pond, but the America
is Chris, otherwise known as M. Christian.
And we're both surfing the weathers, I guess you could say that, in our various locations at the moment. It's coming into it's spring into summer here, and we're enjoying our time and doing what we can. And today, Chris, we have a very special guest today.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. We're going to be talking to Neil from Clips4Sale. Now, Clips4Sale, if you do not know, and I don't know how you wouldn't know, is the preeminent porn and naughty visual clip site. I'm going to give you a little bit about it. Founded in 2003 by Neil, Clips4Sale has since innovated the adult content marketplace, setting the standard for download clips, sales online, and expanding consumer accessibility to fetish content. Now it's celebrating its 17th year, and it boasts over 7 million available clips, showcasing over 1,000 fetishes. Did you know there was 1,000 fetishes clips, Chris?
I'm surprised.
From over 50,000 content producers. That's a lot of people.
Jeez.
A lot of stores on there.
That's a lot of people.
And Neil is at the helm of Clips4Sale, and they have this idea that Clips4Sale is for everyone. Neil says we don't cater one single group or focus on any certain things. It's all it's for all people to use and all people to be part of. That's a very nice, inclusive idea, I think.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And for those who've been there, I mean, Chris and I have only been there for research purposes only, of course. And we have found that it's a great place. And Neil is constantly updating. I mean, people are just putting new stuff up all the time. And you find clips from short to long there, Chris, kind of whatever you're into,
It's a great site. I highly recommend people check it out.
Yeah, it's really something. And I think it's one of those preeminent ones, I don't, and I think the idea there was, I think he grabbed on the idea where, when it all came down, where people weren't really downloading full movies anymore or buying DVDs and, people getting on clips just to get off real quick. And that's basically what it is about, and it's clips. That's where it is, Clips4Sale. I know some people who actually have stores there and sell their content, and, there's a lot of stuff on there, Chris. I think it's, other than maybe like kink.com, which is a specific fetish site, Clips has quite a wide variety of stuff, even stuff that you and I have never thought about,
Well, I know that like other sites, it's like, they also create their own content. So
yeah, Neil doesn't, I think, and, I talked to him one time about something else, and it's a very user-friendly interface. So if you have stuff to put up there, and you want to get your store going, they couldn't make it any easier, And I think that the idea there is they just want people. I mean, Neil knows the more people he gets on the site downloading content, the better it is for business. So why make it difficult,
Exactly. That's the thing, is make it easy to use, make tons of content, make it secure, and you're all set to go.
Yeah. And we've seen situations, we both have places we've either worked for or, again, have been on purely for research purposes, that are a little difficult to surf and navigate, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like so many sites forget that. I mean, if you can't find something and you can't comfortably search for what you're looking for, then it doesn't succeed.
Right. In this day and age where you can go somewhere else pretty damn quickly, why would you wait? Why would you, you're just going to go where you're going to go. So it behooves you, as they say, to have an interface that's as easy to download to as to look at, And Neil has perfected that. Well, I want to get into the early days of Clips for Sale when we talk to him about how they changed and morphed and what they learned, because I think that would be an interesting thing to talk about as well.
Absolutely, because it's always an ongoing process, and especially since the web changes. So certain features or certain things on a site may work one year, but then not another. So
true, and we've seen this too. There's a rise in certain fetish that one year has, not anybody's looking for, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of people looking for. I know this one girl who's on this site, and she does muscle porn. She poses and she's really very built up, a muscular girl, and she does her posing and all that stuff for people to look at. And that's something that I never would have thought of years ago. I didn't even know even it existed. I guess it always existed, but suddenly, certainly it's hot now. And so I guess what it comes down to, Neil, he's just accepting whatever's coming across within his parameters, and we'll find out what that is about too, like anywhere else, But it's certainly an interesting business model, and he's multifaceted and extremely successful. So he's definitely the guy you want to talk to. Yeah, it's a businessman, Chris, like we all are. All right, let me give him a try here. I'm going to give him a call, and then it's a little bit different than we usually do, because I have the phone in my hands, and we're going to record it right off the phone, and we'll see how this goes. But let me give him a buzz, and we'll get him on the show. So hold on a second there, Chris.
No problem.
You're listening to Licking Non-Vanilla with M. Christian, or Chris, as he's better well known, and Ralph Greco Jr.
Exactly.
So let me give him a buzz. Here I go. I'm using the phone. Let's see.
Stand by.
There it is. That's the ring, Chris. Hey, Neil.
Hey, what's up, man?
How you doing? Good to talk to you again. I don't know if you remember. We talked about a year and a half ago. I don't know if you remember.
We did, about the Pioneer thing, right?
No, you know what we were talking about? You guys were looking to put some time and energy and money into other things, and I had called you about maybe audio stuff. And yeah,
that's right.
I ran it by you, and you what I took from that was how kind you were to really take your time, and even it didn't even come to pass, but we extrapolated a bit on it,
Yeah, I do remember.
See that, and now we're recording right now. We record the show, so Chris is on the other line. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear him, but Chris, say hi to Neil.
Hello, Neil.
Can you hear him?
Hey, what's up, Chris? Hey, yeah, I hear you. How you doing?
Great.
Good.
Chris is all the way in Oregon. So, and I'm in New Jersey, and you're in. I won't disclose your location. So,
no, that's okay. I'm in Florida.
So Neil's in Florida, where it's probably hot, right? Is it hot as hell there?
It's pretty hot here today.
Yeah. We're all talking about the weather. It's one of those things you always talk about. So, Neil,
let me ask you, where in New Jersey are you?
I'm in the northern part. I'm 20 minutes out of New York City. I'm in Clifton.
Oh, okay, because I grew up in Cherry Hill.
Oh, okay. All right, south of me, but cool. I know where it is. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
And Chris is kind of a West Coast guy, but he's been all over, right, Chris?
Exactly. I was recently in San Francisco Bay Area. Now I'm up in Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah. So we all get around. So Neil, let's talk a little bit. This Clips for Sale story is very interesting. But when you started way back when, I think it's 17 years now, right? You've been in existence.
Since Clips for Sale started, I've probably been in the industry for like 25. Okay.
So did you see an obvious need for Clips for Sale, or did you kind of fall into it? How did the idea, how did it even come to be?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. So I did kind of fall into it because before Clips for Sale, I had a membership site with a friend, an ex-girlfriend of mine, actually.
Okay.
And once that membership site, it was the typical back in the 1999, 2000, pictures, not really video, mostly images.
Yeah.
So same kind of, monthly fee. But I did start producing a little bit of video, and I had some oh, here. Let me hold on a second. Let me get rid of that. I'll forget. Okay. So the Clips for Sale. So as this was going, as the membership site was going, I started to do a little bit of video, and then as it got more and more video instead of pictures, I had a couple customers who just, requested custom videos.
Mm-hmm.
They're huge now, obviously customs.
Right.
So as I was making these customs for this one customer, I would send him on a videotape, and after a while, he got kind of bored of videotape and said, "Is there a way you could just somehow get him to me through FTP?" Which was a pain in the ass back then.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it just so happens that my brother had a server at his house, and I said, "Hey, how can we make this happen?" He said, "Oh, I'll build you a little FTP." So he made me something. I uploaded it, gave it to the customer. The customer downloaded it. That's kind of the start of it all, and that kind of parlayed into the download aspect, like the paper download style option.
The whole kind of thing that happened with paper download, because really nobody was doing that back then.
And Chris and I were just talking about this because we've been in the business probably around the same time in different ways, but we all saw the advent of digital cutting into the visual marketplace for sure. And we were wondering, like, did you just kept morphing and riding that wave, or you guys were like, holy shit, this is coming, we got to do something?
Yeah. So what happened after I did a bunch of these videos for this one guy, I thought maybe other customers would probably buy the same video because it was not really, it didn't have his name in it or anything. So it was a general type of a video. So same thing. I built with the same servers. We just made a page that just had all these videos on it. And I just said, hey, let's, let me start seeing if people would buy these outside of my customers, just let me put it out there on the internet. So everyone started buying these downloads, and it started making more money than my membership site. And I was like, wait a minute, this is crazy.
This is the thing I got to grab. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And, the weird thing is I was working for my parents at the time. You're driving the whole Southeast U.S. doing like fabric and textiles, which is a nightmare job. But once it started making more money than all that together, I was like, okay, I'm just going to quit working for my family at this point. And I just went full board into my own download site. And then that kind of parlayed into, well, I'm shooting this. It was all foot fetish, by the way. So that's what I started with.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So once I had foot fetish stuff, I said, there's plenty of other foot producers out there that I didn't know them personally, but there was no Twitter, there was no social media. I had to kind of pound the pavement and go one by one, finding their emailing them, explaining what I'm doing, getting them to trust me with their content, and then I'm going to pay them. And, then that kind of turned into a bigger site. And then I said, this has to get automated because I was doing everything manually for maybe 2 years.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Yeah, then I said, we got to figure out a way to do an automated system, get the payouts running the right way. And that's when it all turned into like just a self-sustaining kind of platform.
Which it certainly is, because Chris and I were talking about, how you get constant. I happened to go on the site today, for research purposes, of course, Neil. No other reason. I was talking to Neil today. I said I got to figure out I got to know what I'm talking about. But when I went, every day, the amount of new content is staggering daily. And it's just like yourself, it's just self-sustaining at this point, which I guess is for anybody with an online business, that's what we may mostly want, that kind of income, right? Self-sustaining, consistent income. Right?
Yeah. No, there's no doubt. You want something that's just going to keep going on its own and generating funds. And probably the best thing about it is that, it's not, there was no free porn back then except for news groups. I don't know if you remember those or not, but
yes.
That was the only way to get free porn back then. And which I don't even know if they still exist, but once, having that setup where it's like, these are legit people. Later on, I just said anybody who's amateur at home, their wife, their girlfriend, boyfriend, you can all make money with this sort of concept. And that kind of is when it exploded. Like anybody can be a producer, anybody can be a model. And I think that actually helped the model industry on top of that, because there were so many models now that came out of this over the 2006, 7, and 8. It just like exploded with everybody's a model now. And everybody can make money doing this. And then the models turned into producers. They're like, well, I'll produce my own content. Why am I only getting paid for me shooting for this producer? I can make my own thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Chris, do you have anything? Jump in here because I
want to say I think that's really wonderful because it is very self-empowering. I mean, it's like it allows people to take control of what they're producing, when they're producing, and then they can graduate to creating. I think that's really very cool. And I particularly love the fact that it's like you allowed it sort of like to evolve naturally. So it went from one stage to another pretty effectively. I think that's always very, very wonderful and a very smart business decision.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it was smart or not, but it just happened that way. I didn't plan it. But you know what I did figure out? I talked to, like, there was those porn stars back then when I was a teenager renting movies, like Nina Hartley and people like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I spoke to one, I can't remember, I'm trying to think if it was Ginger Lynn or somebody I spoke to, which I was in shock, like, oh my God, I'm actually talking to this porn star. And I said, like, where's all the content you have? And she goes, well, I don't own any of that content I shot. And I was like, oh my God, all these years you just kind of got paid. And that's when I was like, it goes back to the whole empowering thing. Like, why not have your own content and you own it instead of someone else, making the money off of you and your name? Mm-hmm. You have that power to do it. So unfortunately she was already past, shooting her own content, so she became a producer later on and just produced other girls instead of herself, which was fine with me. It didn't bother me as long as she's making money, and doing her own thing. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's really well, first of all, you have to ride the wave of technology as it changes, which you've done, and like Chris said, you empower people to take matters into their own hands and sink or swim on their own. But the interface that you provide, Neil, because we talked a little bit about this when I called you, is pretty easy to navigate. And I don't know who you talked to or how you found that out, but like there seems to be from the get-go, and I could be wrong, but there seems to be from the get-go, you wanted to make this as easy as possible for people to download their stuff to.
For the customers, you mean? Yeah. Because well, you have to remember, I was a producer of content, so I built it for myself at first. I need to use this for my own thing, so I kind of built it around what I needed and what I thought would be great tools to have for me. But then the customer wise, I thought it was pretty simple. It's like come in, click, download. That's pay and download. That's all there. That's a simple process of just a few things you need to have working right. So. Once that was effectively working, and of course there was no Amazon back then either. There was just different server farms all over the place. But there was a lot of challenges, but from 2004 to 2010 with banking and merchants, and I mean there was so many crazy stuff that went on with banks and stuff back then that we got luckily we went through it, we overcame it and came out on top of it, where a lot of people who either tried to compete or start their own thing, once they saw how successful this was, they didn't understand that there's these walls they're going to hit and how to deal with them. So we kind of got luckily past all those things.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the stuff that's on that site, and Chris and I write a lot of, the stuff we write. It runs the gambit. A lot. It is niche and fetish. You have a ton of stuff on there, Neil. But I'm thinking, the criteria for what you accept. Is there any moments where you're saying, no, that stuff we can't take?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of times where now I don't look at it all myself personally, but it comes to my attention that, hey, so-and-so has this, or, there's definitely there's the Visa, MasterCard kind of rule book that's like, first of all, you don't want to do anything that's going to lose your merchant account. That's like number one.
Yeah, no kidding.
But on
that's
top
a big
of that,
thing,
like
absolutely.
I try not to get my own personal mind into any of this, because I want it to be a free platform for them to use whatever they can think of, basically, as long as it's not, remember back then, nothing was so PC and you could do a lot of stuff without worrying about it. And as the times changed, everything offends everybody now.
That's true.
It's
some way or another, right?
So that became a problem, and it's like, well, why do I want to put myself into that position of I have to now feel that this offends you maybe, but it doesn't offend me or 10,000 customers. So why should this not be allowed? What's the reason for it? I really need to hear an argument as to why, and then I listen to it. I don't mind hearing anyone's opinions and judging it for myself. Like, you got a point there. So it just depends on what it is.
So how about Chris, I was thinking about trends here, right? I mean, what do you think about what you've seen coming up? What do you think, Chris? Like the niche and the fetish that we talk about all the time. I'm thinking to Neil, what do you see a rise of, Neil? I say in the last year, do you see a rise of certain kind of content?
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the thing. So things change, obviously, like you said, but all the time. It started with foot fetish. Foot fetish is still probably in the top 3 selling on the site, just because there's so many producers that are still on there from back then, and so many customers that buy it. So, but then, like, the bondage, the domination, the femdom became really popular, because that, again, there was not really a lot of female domination in the early 2000s and until 2015, 14. So that became more popular. The taboo became very popular out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from, but it just exploded in the last, say, 3 years. Another thing that took a lot of people by surprise was a lot of the BBW community started to really gravitate towards Clips4Sale, seeing that it was such an open platform and so welcoming, to the community, that they started really producing a lot of content. A lot of their fans came on board, and the BBW and the the supersized BBW, that content also really exploded in a great way. And, for me, it's great. I want to help out every every community, every person, anybody that can benefit from it. I'm all for it. So, but there's not like one particular thing. It was like, wow, this one genre really took off out of all. They all kind of just slowly, expanded and of course, another thing too is once something becomes popular, everybody starts shooting it. So taboo.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
800 new people. They're like, oh, I see taboo is popular. I'm going to do it too. And now it explodes.
Right. Chris, jump in here. Is there anything you want to ask him specifically?
Well, I think that's really very fascinating. And you're right. It's like, that's kind of the weird thing about, when things get popular. It's kind of like we were just chatting, Ralph and I, about 50 Shades of Grey and how it's like it exploded in the erotica world and then everybody was imitating it. And then suddenly the whole genre shifted. But I think it's really very fascinating. And I love, like, just kind of like, this is going to sound weird, but I love studying your site, because to see how those trends work, to see what's popular one day or what's trending and so forth. I think that's really fascinating.
Yes. Yeah, and there is a lot of content on there, and we just have to continue to build better tools for the customers to be able to see what's trending, what's popular, those things. And of course, all the studios and the models and producers, they use those same tools to see the same thing the customers are like. What is popular? What is everybody buying right now? And that's how things start to shift and ride different waves, just because of what became, one person might think of something that nobody thought of, and it gets popular, and next thing you know, it's like a big thing, and it just turns into, and it could last 6 months, a year, 2 months. It just depends on how many people jump on it and how many customers really can relate to that category or whatever you want to call it, fetish,
So how's the future look? I mean, what as right now, do you see you guys getting into anything different, or do you see just keep plowing along and getting more content until you just keep filling it up? I mean, what's the future model here, if there is one?
I mean, technically, if you really wanted to just get to the basics, it could just continue to go where it is and just keep growing and let people just keep adding content. But I think the better thing to do would be to continue to innovate with the platform itself, because we've never done, user accounts. I was always against having someone sign up for something because I hate to do it myself. But we do realize that there is a lot of power in having a user account section where they can come in and stream their content, and now you can really consume a lot of data from what's that one customer doing so much, and how can we help him find the content faster, and even the communication between the producer / model to the customers would be something interesting to do. The only problem is all these laws keep coming out, SESTA, FOSTA, this one, that one, and it starts to cloud everything when it comes to when you want two people to be able to communicate. It's like, why should they be able to talk to each other about what I like? What can you shoot that's good for me in this genre? where you have to be careful now what they say to each other, and it's money, it's exchange, it's crazy. But I do want to allow the customers more freedom and the studios and models more freedom to be able to try to communicate better with their customers, because that is key to them as well. For the studios, they want to what do my customers want more of? So it's easier for them to know what to shoot if they know what's out there, what the customers want.
Which is perfect. We always say the producer, the provider, having some sort of a direct contact with their customer base. Whether you're making pizzas or you're shooting diaper porn, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good to have a little, because we always talk about on the show, although the show's a little pointed about, Chris and I are sex writers and all that kind of stuff. There's a large amount of this that crosses every kind of thing anybody does. It's just business, and it's human relations. And we all want the same, I think we all want the same things for the positive progression of those things, I like to think.
Yeah,
exactly.
And obviously the goal is, I've always been someone that wants to help people growing up, and even just as myself as a person in my teens. And after I was always that helpful guy that's like, oh, you need advice, I'll talk to you. So I tried to bring all that into the business and make it a good, solid business. I brought my family into the business. After I quit working for my family, I brought them into my business, and we kind of all work together to grow it, as big as it is. And that was the whole. It was it's a family, it's a community, and it's something that I can be proud of myself. So at least I always saw the shady side of adult growing up. It's like, oh, this is all seedy. You got to be careful.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I was like, well, that's not going to be how this is. This is going to be run like a family business, like I'm used to, because I grew up in a family business. So this is what I brought to it. My father is older than me, so he brings that old school mentality also with business. So that's, I think, part of our success is knowing how to deal with customers, doing things the right way, being quick, to get back to people. I always hated waiting 24 hours to get back to somebody. That just drove me nuts.
Oh, yes.
So, important thing. And I think I probably disrupted the entire adult industry by having a support team that was quick, like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, you can call the owner directly kind of thing. And nobody was doing that. So now everyone's kind of like, well, shit, how do you compete with having support all the time and good support?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like, that's Chris and I say that all the time. You get back, especially this day and age, you can get back to people pretty easily. So there's no reason why you shouldn't,
Exactly.
There's so many ways
it's like,
to get back to people now. It's not like just a phone or just email. It's so easy. And that's why I put my number on the site, because I thought maybe somebody would want to reach out and talk to me about whatever it is. I didn't care what you wanted to call me about.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you have the access to me if you want it. That's all. And I just thought that was a powerful tool.
And it speaks to a kind of a way you run your business, and that, and I think that that speaks volumes,
Absolutely. That's really admirable.
There's a problem, you can tell me directly. Like a lot of people are afraid to call me thinking, what, I'm going to close your store because you have something negative to say. Like, this is just life. It's not everything is great and dandy. There's always, good and bad. And I always like to hear, something that's wrong or what we could fix to make it better. And those are the things sometimes they get calls about. It's like, okay, well, you made a good point and I'm going to do something about that. So we'll fix it or we'll change it or whatever it is.
That's cool.
So that's what I like about it.
Chris, get in a couple things here. We're going to wrap up with them, I think. But anything else?
No problem.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to say that's really admirable, because these days it's one of those things that often sites will not necessarily forget, but not put an emphasis on, is that customer service thing. They think just throw it up and then walk away. And to be so active and so so accessible when it comes to support is really admirable. I can't praise that enough. So thank you very much for that.
Sure. And anytime. And even, even to this day, people will text me about just like, because now there's so many ways to get in touch with you. Like you said, text, email, call. And it's just like whatever way you pop up, WhatsApp now they have, it's everything.
Right.
And I'm available on every possible, except for Twitter. It's the only thing I don't do is Twitter myself. But anything else, I'm available to chat with you about whatever. So I just have always been that kind of personable person, and I just continue to just to be that way. It's not going to change, because that's just who I am.
Well, you certainly were personable to us and always have been. And we thank you so much for coming on Licking Non-Vanilla. It's
Absolutely.
been
Thank you so much.
It's been a delight, Neil.
Anytime, of course, anytime you need to reach out for anything, I'm always here. If you need me for anything else, doesn't matter.
Thank you.
You just let me know.
And everybody go to Clips4Sale. If you've never been to Clips4Sale.
Yeah, you'll be on there for an hour just trying to find, so many different things and what you're, what you don't know if you're even into it yet, but you might be into it by the time you're done shopping.
He's absolutely right.
There you go. I love that attitude. That's great.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Well, this doesn't get any better than that, does it, Chris?
That's cool. That was very cool. I have to say that I really like his attitude, and I think the site is really wonderful, and I particularly like the customer service and the empowerment he does with the content creators.
Yeah, he just established that from the get-go, and I think to be as open and transparent as he could with both the buyer and the creator, and then having the buyer and the creator have the ability to contact each other, like he said, because I know the people that I know who have stores on the site, a lot of their business is custom. So they certainly want communication because they want to make the business they want to make custom clips for people. So
exactly.
And like he said, Neil's the kind of guy, like if you have a problem and you want to address something, he's there because he wants to make the site as good as it can be,
And again, it's also very self-empowerment for the creators because, like the story he relayed about people who don't have their content. In other words, it was produced, over a time, and now it belongs to the producer of the studio. It's like, that's really kind of a difficult situation to be in because suddenly it's like you're known for work, but you can't actually directly profit off it. Versus working with people who are, amateur creators, they can basically create what they want and get basically the lion's share of it, which is wonderful.
Well, think about that. You just said something really. Real salient point, which a lot of musicians unfortunately found out. They created all this music back in the day, but they never owned it. And that's tough because you created this stuff, and somebody else has maybe half the publishing, but somebody else has the master tapes. This was a thing that Prince went through, and a lot of bands that have survived. If they've been doing it for a long time. I know, for instance, like a band like Cheap Trick, after a while, the contract ran out on the masters and they got their masters back. So they could do with them what they wanted to do. But, some of that stuff was lasting for 25, 30 years. And but you're talking about porn, like the original porn people like of the 70s and 80s. I don't know any performer. I mean, there probably are some, but I don't know any performer that owns their content at all. And
exactly.
That's tough.
And it's funny, it's like, we're spoiled because, pretty much universally, though, some publishers have been known to kind of pull this trick. I mean, most publishers are pretty good about returning rights when you ask them to or something similar. Yeah. So, I mean, at least I've never had an experience. But you're right. It's like musicians and people who create, like, work in the comics medium. The comic publishers are notorious. So if you create a character, the character doesn't belong to you. They can do whatever they want with it, including, take your work and, basically, adapt it for other media without giving you credit or payment, which is really infuriating. And it's been that way for, a long time.
Well, that was the what happened to the guys who created Superman, right? I mean,
exactly.
Right. Yeah. And it was a terrible story about how they didn't get their due. And guys like Stan Lee, who for years was talking about, he was a writer and artist and creator for hire. And he, him and Jack Kirby and all those guys, they created the stuff stuff that now has seen a new life in billion-dollar movie franchises. And these, I think Stan Lee finally did settle before he died, though, didn't he? There was a big settlement with Stan Lee. I think
I'm not too sure. I mean, it's all a big fuzzy thing because a lot of, now it's actually going to be becoming more common for have creator-owned comics.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, it kind of is an interesting parallel to musicians because, musicians, like you said, the only time you could ever get your work out there was to sign with a record label. Yeah. And the same way with comic books. If you're a comic book creator or, many other media, you had to sign with a studio. It's the only way you get it done. But now that's changing. And so now, it's basically kind of the version of self-publishing. Musicians can put out records on their own. Adult performers can do the same. Even comic creators can do the same. Yes, you get probably a little less exposure, but it also means you control everything, as opposed to, like you said, work from hire, where your work can be basically changed or taken away from you at any time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and that's the thing about now that we have more avenues to get the stuff far and wide. Although there is a lot of stuff now, so it's harder to be heard or seen above the din, as we say all the time. But at the same time, you own the content in a lot of the cases.
Exactly.
And that makes it a little more lucrative if something happens where you suddenly, the people coming to you for content. And on something like Clips4Sale, there's a percentage of, first of all, you own the content, whatever you produce.
Right.
And Neil's platform allows for you to grab the content. So Neil, for that, Neil gets a certain percentage of what the price of the download. But beyond that, you own that content and can do whatever you want with it, And I think in every business, if you can own, we say this all the time, content is king. But if you own the content, it's a whole different story.
Exactly.
And I don't know. I know you said this before, and I'm trying to think of in my own. I guess there are instances where I've seen someone buy the rights for something from me, and I couldn't reuse it. But that doesn't happen all that often. I mean, does like even North American serial rights even exist anymore?
It's gotten a little more sloppy. Not sloppy, I should say it's gotten a little more loose.
Okay.
Like for instance, I mean, it used to be, when I first got into publishing, and I know you about the same time, which was like, the late 80s, early 90s, they were pretty good about sending out contracts and agreements and stuff like that. Now it's like it still exists, but in many cases it just simply doesn't happen because you'll send a story, they say, okay, we want it, and it's assumed it's going to be North American serial rights, which for listeners don't know, basically it means that they own your story for a limited amount of time, like for instance, like a year or 2 years, like that. And afterwards, you can resell the work as long as you acknowledge where it appeared first. Many of them also have certain caveats, like don't sell the story within a certain amount of time because you don't want to, the story doesn't want to compete with its first, appearance. And, I do know that, for instance, some of the nonfiction places, particularly like articles and such, they often will like retain rights or something similar, though they're not really all that draconian around it. I mean, they don't, obviously, when you're doing nonfiction, you can't really resell it, because it's written usually for a particular site or publication, and reselling it doesn't really work. Collection of articles and so forth.
Right. Well, yeah, because I'm thinking, it's weird too. We were talking about this on another show about playwriting. The playwriting world is kind of odd, and I'll tell you why. And a lot of what I send out, because I'm unagented,
right?
However that I would say that. I'll get these dentures working. But in a lot of those instances, it's like, well, send us this play, and it needs to be this long, and maybe the theme. But we want a premiere. This play can never have been produced anywhere. It could have had readings or workshopping, but we want the premiere of this play, which. I do have plenty of stuff that's never been done before, but that's a strange restriction. And I understand because a lot of houses, especially community theater houses or smaller regional places, want to be able to say, here's the premiere of this. Or six brand new plays never seen anywhere else. I understand that, but it puts a hamstring on me a bit because there are some times where I'm like, well, this play would fit perfectly here. I can send it out. Wait a minute. It's been done here. And I generally like to be honest with that stuff. So I don't send it out. And I'm a little hamstrung by that because I'm like, well, I in order for me to get the plays done, they need to be done. So as many places as possible, as many places we could send the story and reuse the story is great for us. It's great. But if you don't have the ability to, it kind of holds you down a little bit. With what
exactly,
it's a little counterproductive. You know?
I completely understand. I mean, it's like in the fiction writing world, of course, we both know that sometimes places will say no reprints.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, and that's the same kind of thing. It's like, you know, you can sell it afterwards, but when they want original content, that's perfectly fine. But sometimes it's really kind of like, well, what if the story's not been in print for like 5 or 6 years? I mean, you know, many people haven't seen it, or, you know, something similar. So it's the same, it's sort of the same kind of thing. And it definitely can get frustrating, especially like, you know, some places might want like original content, and then they want like, you know, you have to sign a contract where you can't sell it anywhere for like a ridiculously long amount of time. Right. But yeah, it's just like, I can understand why they do it. It's still kind of frustrating.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, look, too, if you're on Clips4Sale and you're making, you know, diaper content. I have a friend of mine, Little Ivy, and she makes diaper porn. Well, it's not really even porn. It's just diaper content, you know, girls, mainly girls in diapers and all the things they do. And kind of like almost you know, an infantilism kind of vibe to it, and very, very softcore and very fun. And I'm thinking, like, if she puts up 3 movies a month and she didn't own those movies, then, you know, in some instances she can't. In some instances, like we were talking before, she makes specific content for somebody who paid her just for his own movies. That's all he wants. Right. She does it. But in other instances, in some instances, man, I can't talk today. In some instances, she can take that content and put it up on the site for anybody to see. Right. But anyway, if you have a bunch of stuff on your site and people are going to it a lot, you know, oh yeah, I'm coming here and I'm hitting and I'm hitting and I'm hitting, especially with Clips4Sale stuff. You know, you get like 5 minutes, 10-minute clips. You know, you can get, you know, Clips4Sale's a site that's seen around the world, so you can possibly get a lot of viewers. But just think of the fact that you don't own that stuff. Suddenly, you don't own that stuff. So people are coming in. You produced it somehow. You made maybe a little bit of money, but you don't own it. That's a lot of stuff going out the door over and over and over again. Like you're paying and paying and paying and paying, and you don't own it. And that's really frustrating. It's really frustrating.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. And of course, we haven't even touched on the whole subject of piracy.
Right, yeah.
Because it's like, you know, I have to say that we're spoiled as writers, because the number of places that, you know, will, you know, have pirated like literary works is pretty small, though they do exist. Where people will rip up an ebook and put it up as a PDF or so forth, but it's not as popular as like adult entertainment images or even music. So it's a whole different facet. I mean, and of course there's really little you can do about it. I do know sometimes, well, like articles, you know, a shady site will show up and they'll just basically repost articles without permission. Yeah. Now you can do it with permission or put a link in, but these people are just like basically reposting it to get like ad clicks and so forth. Yeah. But yeah, it's a major problem because there's really not much you can do about it. I mean, that's one of the biggest headaches is that, you know, it's like, you know, you can try and do all this kind of stuff. And I know sometimes, you know, beginning writers will get really, you know, phobic around, you know, the publisher doing things without permission, but it's not the publisher you got to worry about. You know, it's, you know, people who just like decided like they like your story or your book and they just basically rip it off the web and then, you know, distribute it, you know, all around. So it can be very frustrating.
Yeah. And I mean, this is basically the core of what Lars Ulrich was talking about with Metallica, you know, how all of a sudden Napster came along and you could just download what you wanted and spread it around as you wanted to. And, you know, people created this stuff and they own this stuff. So unless you come to me and I mean, you know, that was that Harlan Ellison story when someone came to, this happened relatively recently. For those of you who don't know who Harlan Ellison is, go look him up. But anyway, one of the best writers of the last, you know, last centuries. And he was approached by somebody, somebody was making a documentary about a writer, another writer who we happen to love, and came up to him and said, "Look, you know, you said this piece about them a couple years ago. I want to run the piece in this documentary." And Ellison said, "Okay, fine, well, pay me." And they were like, "Well, why would I pay you for that?" And he's like, "Why wouldn't you pay me for that?" They thought because he gave his views on camera and was recorded by somebody else, that that wasn't those thoughts were not his intellectual property. So so he was like, well, you got, if I were to write you a piece about him, you'd pay me. Because why wouldn't you pay me? So it's the same kind of idea. Whatever you're producing, whether it's coming out of your mouth or it's coming out of your fingers or you're singing about it or whatever it is, be careful about, if you don't want to own it, that's fine. You want to give it away for whatever price, go ahead and do that. But there are there can be repercussions down the line, and you're like, man, I don't own the rights to this. I'm going to get screwed. So,
and it's like, not to take away from Harlan, because he actually had a perfectly legitimate point on that. There's also a sort of a balancing act. Like sometimes it's like, I mean, let's give you a quick little story. I mean, I had a friend who drew some kind of stylistic kind of erotic art. This is a long time ago. This is early days of the web, but before social media. Because social media right now, sharing stuff isn't a problem. I mean, if you go to like Pinterest or Tumblr or anywhere for that matter, and you can select and share images because the artist hopefully has put them up there, and that's kind of the purpose of it. But this guy came across a site where someone had posted his artwork. Now, it's a little different because the artwork it was posted illegally, I mean, without the artist's permission, but it was a fan site. So they acknowledged the artist and actually like put links in where the people could purchase the images. And it's one of those kind of weird gray areas, because yes, it was technically illegal and technically it was violating copyright and it was done without permission, which is a major no-no. But I also thought my artist friend kind of overreacted. He instantly threatened to sue them and, all this kind of stuff. And I kept thinking, this guy is adoring your work and getting it out there for exposure. I mean, why don't contact him and say, thank you much, you did it without permission, but here's how we can work around that? Because it just kind of came off as being almost spiteful as opposed to working with them. Now, that situation is very unique and kind of dated now because of social media and the rules about sharing. But, I do think it's kind of a tightrope walk sometimes, because if you overreact to someone who's sharing something with good intention versus someone who's trying to rip you off, and then there's a whole question about, earning money with it. Like, for instance, I know many artists will do things like, give away music or images or even written words, but, not for commercial use. In other words, you can't use it to put on your site and make money, which is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, and I think that, like you're saying, if and when you're presented with the circumstance, you can weigh it and say, look, you're going to take this for free, but it's going to be seen across this huge platform where a lot of other people will go. So there's a lot to be considered. You can't just say every situation is this doesn't work or this always works. You can't. You just have to take it. Hopefully, you're in a position where you have those considerations. But I think what we're all asking at the end of the day is to at least be confronted and asked, and then we can make the decision. So that's just kind of where we're at. I think that's
exactly. And there is a difference between someone who's doing a fan site and trying to support your work and someone who's just basically ripping you off.
Yeah, big difference.
And that becomes, unfortunately, these days, that's pretty much the predominant thing when it happens. It's rare to find someone who creates an unauthorized fan site. But there's a lot of people who are just out there, just really shady people who are just like ripping off content and putting it up on their site,
absolutely.
And there's little you can do about it, unfortunately. I mean, unless you can contract the host. And very often social media is really bad about policing that. And even if you catch people doing it, it takes forever for it to get down, and then just simply open up another account.
That's right. It just rolled to another place. And this is what's happening with porn. You see porn pirated constantly.
Oh, constantly. Absolutely.
But a guy like Neil, I think, is doing his damnedest to circumvent that. So make it so the producer and the fan both have a comfortable and, like you said, you used the word before, empowering experience. And it just can't. Well, evidently it's working. He's been in business almost 20 years doing Clips4Sale, and it's healthy as hell. So he's doing very good work. And we want to thank Neil very much. Thank you, Neil, for coming on today.
Absolutely.
This has been Licking Non-Vanilla, as it's always been. Chris, I don't know what else to say. Every minute spent with you is a golden hour. What can I tell you?
It always is wonderful, Ralphie. Always wonderful. Looking forward to the next one for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Chris. This has been Ralph Greco Jr. here on this side of the plains, and that over there is
Chris, otherwise known as M. Christian.
And this has been Licking Non-Vanilla. We thank you very much for listening. I'll talk to you soon, Chris. You take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
And visit us on the web at www.lickingnonvanilla.com.